Hey everyone, today Jesus heals a blind man, eventually. Jesus and his disciples came to Bethsaida. Some people brought a blind man to Jesus and begged him to touch and heal him. Taking the blind man's hand, Jesus led him out of the village. After spitting on his eyes and laying his hands on the man, he asked them, "Do you see anything?" The man looked up and said, "Well, I see people, but they look like trees, only they're walking around." Then Jesus placed his hands on the man's eyes again, and he looked with his eyes wide open, and his sight was restored, and he could see everything clearly. And Jesus sent him home, saying, "Don't go into the village." So while it really seems like Jesus is having an off day here, right? A miracle that takes 2 tries. What's going on? Now, we have seen in other stories where a lack of faith in the community hinders what Jesus is able to do. That happened in Nazareth. And so we're reminded that faith is a two-way street, but I think this miracle is meant to function as kind of a living parable, right? The question is, how quickly can we see clearly? Yesterday, we had a story of the disciples not getting it, and Jesus being kind of frustrated by that. Like Jesus literally said, "Don't you have eyes? Why can't you see?" And so this blind man whose sight is partially restored and then fully restored illustrates what often happens with all disciples of Jesus. Clarity and illumination, those things don't usually happen overnight. As much as we wish it would, both as teachers and as learners. Right? As learners, our challenge is to recognize when we still don't quite see everything yet. And as teachers, our challenge is to not give up on people who are still on their way. Have you ever thought about how crazy it is that we have so many stories in the Gospels of the disciples being kind of stupid, of them not getting it? Because by the time that these stories were actually written down, this is decades later, right? Peter and John and the others, they're respected, wise leaders in the church and their communities. If it were me, if I were Peter, I'd say, "Hey, Mark, can we leave that story out? It kind of makes me look bad." Think about yourself, though. Think about some things that maybe you didn't see clearly a few years ago, or even a decade ago. Think about some of the things you thought then. I kind of cringe to think about some of those opinions. Hopefully, your perspective has changed a little bit, right? That's actually a sign of growth. If it's not happening, then maybe you're not growing like you should be. So admitting that we don't see it all yet is a sign of humility. And so when we show that kind of humility, that's when we can experience Jesus' healing.